Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don, and I hope you're having a lovely day today. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments on whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and they will show up here in my chat room and we can talk directly. Yesterday was the ambient holiday, otherwise known as Christmas. I was originally going to do a live program yesterday, but I decided to go ahead and do a best of because it was. Um, I figured there probably wouldn't be that many people with the ambient holiday going on, and it was raining, and I was tired, and I figured a best of would be good. So I did that. But today we're back live, and I wanted to talk today about getting ready for the new year. Most of the people who are likely to be watching this have already celebrated their midwinter holidays in the Northern Hemisphere. Um, Many of us last week, some of us yesterday, some of us both. And of course, there are still a few midwinter holidays going on. A few people may still be observing, but all in all, we're moving into that time of getting ready for the new calendrical year. And hello to Lapus in the chat room. It's good to see you, Lapus. And it is a time where very often we go over the events of the last year, think about our desires for the new year, um, and get ready for a change that we hope to make in the change of the year. Usually, any year-end holiday deals with the idea of the death of the old year and the birth of the new year, and people very often want to reflect this in their lives. Allowing things that they wish to release to go, and manifesting things they want to bring in. We are currently at the full moon, which is an excellent time for manifestation. And so I thought today would be a good day to think about the things you want to manifest in the coming year. Um, Now, of course, some of our people, and hello to Tom in the chat room, some of our people are in the southern hemisphere, so this is not the midwinter holidays for them. But for most of them, it is still the change of the calendrical year. And granted, we have liturgical years that change at other points in the calendar, but the calendrical year is still a major force to be reckoned with. And it's a time when everyone is thinking of change. Through the midwinter holidays, people have experienced all sorts of emotions. Hello to Krista in the chat room. Hello to Renee in the chat room. Some people had wonderful times meeting with their family. Some people had difficult times meeting with their family. Some people were on their own. And for most people, there has been a great deal of emotion involved, either positive or negative. And um, today is a good day to stop and look at that, to look at the good things that you've experienced through this season, and to release the bad things you've experienced through this season, and put yourself back in a grounded position for going forward. I've talked previously in a show a couple of weeks ago about what I recommend for people who have toxic relatives, which is don't deal with them um, for the most part. And if you make the choice to deal with them, well, then you must make the best of it. But you're under no obligation to deal with people who are not going out of their way to deal well with you. But there are still many people who do this anyway. So if you've done that and you're feeling exercised about disagreements in the family, this is a good time to say, okay, this happened. We're leaving it in the past. We're taking hold of our own future and moving forward. Similarly, if you've had a wonderful time and it was full of positive emotions, this is a good time to say, these emotions give me strength. They're wonderful things. I will carry them forward and still ground yourself for moving forward into the new year. It it is an interesting time, I think, as we look at the wider society. Many people have self-defeating ideas that they engage in at this time. One of them is the famous New Year's resolution, which most people make on the anticipation that they're not going to maintain it. Um, and as magical people, we must be careful not to have that sort of mindset. Because if we set ourselves to do something but believe we're not really going to do it, well, of course we're not going to do it. We create our own reality, and we create it based in part on our expectations and our intentions. And if our intention is to pick something that we don't really believe we can do, well, then we won't be able to do it. So as you look at the end of year 23 and the coming beginning of year 24, and you look at those things you wish to develop in the new year, choose things that you actually can see yourself doing, not pie in the sky ideas that you might like to do, but no, you're not. But rather things that you really might be able to do, things you can be able to do. And if you choose them as something you wish to develop in your life, don't think of it as something you might do, but something that you have resolved to do and that you will do as you go forward. This is a magical mindset. And it's important when you set things out magically that you go forward in the confidence that yes, absolutely, it can and will happen. Um, because if inside you're already thinking that it will not, then you've sabotaged your action. You've sabotaged your spell. Um, and of course, it won't work under those circumstances, or will be very hard for it to work, certainly. So it's very important to choose um, things that you can be confident that you truly want and will truly focus on pursuing. And if there are certain things that seem like they'll be very hard for you to do, that doesn't mean you can't choose them, but it does mean you need to do the work to address your expectations to make sure you believe you can actually achieve it. The famous example, well, there are a couple of famous examples, but one of the famous examples is the person who does spell work for the ideal job that they'd really like to have, but in their heart they don't believe they can get it. Of course, they're not going to get it. Or the person who does magic to bring the ideal love into their life, but inside they really don't believe there is such a thing as an ideal love and believe that such situations will always be negative. Well, of course, you're not going to create a positive situation when you truly are focused on a negative one. You need to change that focus in order to have that positive result. So, I'm suggesting that you take this next several days leading up to the calendrical new year to think about the things in your life that you wish to change, the things in your life you wish to move forward, and look for whatever impediments there might be in your own belief systems, your own expectations, your own ideas, and work on clearing those. And then go ahead and aim for what it is you want. There's an old saying that if you aim for the moon but you miss, you will at least end up among the stars. And I would say that you should choose what you want, even if it seems unlikely, and aim for that. But at the same time, you must believe it's possible. And I do see a lot of people who sabotage their own workings by not believing that what they want is actually possible. And hello to Michelle in the chat room. It's good to see you, Michelle. Um, this has been, well, all times really are interesting times. I was going to say this last 20 years or so has been a very interesting time. Um, but all times really are interesting. One of the things I think that we do as humans is we look back on our childhood and remember all of the good things that we were aware of, and don't remember the bad things because as children we often weren't aware of them. I've seen people making posts on Facebook and so forth, wishing they could go back to the 60s or early 70s when things were so much better. And all I can say is, boy, you don't remember the 60s and 70s. There were riots and protests and all kinds of social upheaval and constant talk of revolution and um, all kinds of unrest in society. And it certainly was not a quiet, placid period. But people sometimes seem to remember it that way. And, if you were 5 years old or 10 years old, well, of course you would, um, because you're remembering the child's point of view. I think this is the root of a lot of people's nostalgia in every generation. You can find it literally in every generation. Uh, you'll find you'll find older people talking about the excesses of younger people and how much better it was in their day, um, in the Baroque period, in the Renaissance period, in the Roman Empire, constantly throughout history. And the truth of the matter is, we always live in times of change. We always live in times of unrest. We always live um, in interesting times. It's just a question of where that interest is. As I look around the world today, it would be easy to think that we live in a time of greater consternation than other times. But then, if I remember my parents' lifetime, what I find is the Great Depression and World War II. Um, I can't really think that that period was any less extreme than this one. And I certainly know that people had just as much fear for their future, just as much concern with things going on around them, and just as much desire to make positive change in their world. And looking at what happened in that generation, they did make positive change, just not everything they would have wanted, um, or at least those who were working for change. And I think our generation. Well, actually, I'm a little old to be talking about our generation now, but the younger generation will find the same thing. Same thing my generation found, that we will be able to make some positive change, but there's always going to be more. We can never get done everything we want to get done, but this is like the Karelian Peace Prayer and the Karelian Peace Campaign. I spoke about it the other day. We had people when we started saying, well, this is a waste of time because you'll never have perfect peace. And our response is, well, what does it matter if we can't have perfect peace if we can have greater peace? Every step in the right direction takes you closer to the ultimate goal. So no, you'll never change everything you want to change. Um, but there are so many things you can do. And I think this coming year is going to be a year of people on many different sides fighting for the changes they want to see. And what I would say to you who are watching this or listening to this, be thinking of the changes you want to see, not only in your own life, but in the world around you. Because I think you'll find that it's a time for change. The numerology of the coming year under the Gregorian calendar is the number 8. And the number 8 is very much a karmic number. It is often associated with the planet Mars. It's a number of great success or great failure, and nothing in between. Definitely a time of change and dramatic actions. And I don't need to go over all the things happening in the world which show the playing ground for change and dramatic action in the coming year. They should be quite obvious to everyone. So think about the changes you want to see. Be prepared to speak for the world you want to form. Um, and Krista in the chat room says, Good point. Due to my ADHD, I'm careful what I want to manifest since I'm so forgetful. I could set myself up for failure easily. Little steps toward the goal work better for me. And this is a very wise point. And they say that those who know themselves are truly blessed. When you know that something works best for you, that's always what you should do. And incrementalism, I find, is often the best way to achieve anything. Trying to do everything at once very often leads to failure, not least because of the subject we're talking about, expectation. Um, Often, when you try to do everything all at once rather than in a number of steps, you've set up your expectation for not being able to do that much. And very often, it's your expectation that will come to pass more than your desire. So it's very important to work on our expectations, and little steps are, I think, often a vital magical tool. It is true to use an old saying that a chasm cannot be crossed in two steps, but usually it's not a chasm, and a mountain is not climbed in a leap. I think that working out a successful strategy for the things that you wish to manifest in this world, whether in your personal life or in general, that involves moving from um, one smaller step to the next smaller step to the third smaller step to the fourth, is often the best way to go. What is it that's most necessary for the first step? Don't don't worry about being in the last step as your first act, but think about the things that are going to make your wishes come true and what's necessary to provide the environment in which that can happen, and move to it one step at a time. I think you'll find that is a successful policy. And yes, of course, through magic, we can also take those giant leaps. Um, but sometimes they're best taken in small steps. As we look at the coming year, it's a time when people on many different sides of many different arguments are fighting for major changes that are not conducive to each other. Um, there are people who want very much to force one way of life on all populations. Um, and I'm put in mind of an article that just was published in the Atlantic magazine, which we may do a show on sometime this week, but not today. But I will comment that it basically is a diatribe on how everything bad in the world, everything bad that affects the Judeo Chrislamic matrix of religion, is somehow due to paganism. Um, this is a very typical way that majority populations often do try to look at minority populations, as if somehow the people who are in charge of most everything just can't do anything because there are a few people who disagree with them. Hello, Michael, in the chat room. It's good to see you, Michael. Um, and that somehow the key to getting a good society is the genocide of the other, whomever the other may be. Um, and we certainly see some people in the world today who are taking that point of view. And I think that, particularly being ourselves a minority religion or group of minority religions, we must oppose that point of view. Um, or we must oppose it, or we may die with it. Um, we cannot ignore it, although I've watched the pagan community ignore the growing threat of Christian dominionism for most of my career in the pagan community. And I've watched them be given basically inside information as to how things were being done, how they were planned, and simply say, "Oh, that couldn't happen," and ignore it. Well, now most of those plans have in fact succeeded. Um, the question is, will the total plan succeed? And we'll find out. But the one thing we can be certain of is that it's far more likely to succeed if we ignore it. And if other people who are affected by it ignore it, we need to take it seriously. And hello to Jason in the chat room. It's good to see you, Jason. Um, and Jason and I had an interesting morning. We survived a flood. But I've always said that I would survive a flood. So, um, and we had a small demonstration this morning, and Jason was very heroic in stemming back the rising tides. Um, it was a flood of coffee. So I suppose it was at the same time an excess of bounty. So it all depends on how you look at things. Um, can there be too much coffee? No, but it can be in the wrong place. Um, but coming back to the coming year, I feel like in some ways, more than most years, these issues are going to be central for many people. And I think it's very important that we remain mindful of them. I think if we don't, we may find ourselves becoming mindful in far less pleasant ways. Um, and meanwhile, while we talk about changes we might like to see in the world, we also need to think of those changes we want to see in our lives. What do you want to see in your life in year 24? Um, maybe you want to focus on the business portions of your life. Maybe you want to focus on the emotional portions of your life. Maybe you want to focus on spiritual growth. Maybe you want to focus on all of them. And I see no reason you can't do any of those things. But I think that you'll do it better if you begin focusing on it now. And Lipa says many people are hurt these days. That's very true. And, I personally think that there has been quite an effort through the media, and I'm not normally one to criticize the media, but in this sense, I will, to get people to focus on their hurt and on the things that outrage them, because it drives eyes, which drive advertising, which drives money. Goes back to the 1970s and the news saying that what bleeds leads. Um, and I don't know how that can change. Um, but I think the world would be a better place if we did make some effort to change that. I was thinking um, when I was doing the Toxic Relatives show, and I may have talked about it during that program, that for a lot of people, I think there has been a major cultural attempt to emphasize family conflict as a kind of cultural trope around the holidays, which of course makes it worse, makes it grow. Um, and this brings us back to that magical mindset where attention goes, energy flows, as they say. And so, my recommendation is look for your hurt. Many people are hurt these days. Find your hurt, do some shadow work, and bring some healing to it. And then look again. Look at the causes, look at the situations. And having done some healing for your hurt, go in and fix the situations. Take a practical attitude. Um, Nothing else in the end really makes changes. And I think all too often, people today focus on the effect rather than the cause. And in magic, at least if you're properly practicing it, you focus on the causes. You focus on changing those situations. You focus on um, changing what produces the results. Sometimes you're conscious of how you're doing that. Sometimes you're kind of leaving that to the universe, but always that's what you're doing. Um, it is, magic when you think about it, when properly pursued, is the interior decorating of your universe and moving things from one place to another to make life more desirable and more livable. And one of the techniques I was given many years ago and often use is the idea of creating a room in time. Maybe I'll share that with you right now. The idea of creating a room in time um, can be applied to a situation or to a day. And many times I'll do this at the beginning of my day, and I will see that day as if it were a room, a large, well, could be large, could not be large, but an empty room with nothing in it. And then I will put the things that I want to happen in that day into that room as pieces of furniture. And then I will bring it into existence through magic. And in bringing the room into existence, it brings all the things you've placed into it into existence. Um, I have found it to be a fairly useful technique, not least in causing you to slow down and look at those things that you're wishing to bring into that day and giving them a visual format to focus on. But then, as I've often said, I'm a very visual person. As an artist, all my life, I've always focused on images and visualization. So for me to do it, to make my day in such a visual manner is very effective. You might find it effective too, or you might not. It depends on your personal uh, tastes and skills. And I can never say often enough that magic is an individual matter because we're individual people. Not everyone has the same skills, and I don't know that. I do ultimately believe everyone can develop the same skills, but not with equal ease. And not always um, is there a need for us to have the exact same skills. I visualize extremely easily. I understand there are people who can't visualize at all, but they can still feel the energy. So, what does it matter if they can visualize it? If you can feel it, you can do the same things. It's just a slightly different way of approaching it. And I think that in magic and in life, there are many different ways of approaching it. But in all those different ways, you're ultimately doing the same thing. You're affecting the cause in order to affect the result. And I see that we've come to the end of our half hour. I hope you've enjoyed this half hour. And I hope that as we begin our last week of year 23, you can start to think a little bit about what you want to see in year 24. Not in terms of unrealistic New Year resolutions, but in terms of very realistic thoughts of what you can and cannot truly focus on practically and magically, um, and the changes you really can bring about. And I hope that year 24 will be a miraculous year for all of us in which we can truly bring about the world we wish to see. I want to thank you for joining me. I love spending this time with you. Oh, hello to George in the chat room. And George says, have a good day, Don. You have a great day, George. And everyone have a great day. And I thank you for being here. And let us close as we always do with our prayer. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives. And we ask you to help us to be clear in our expectations and our belief systems and our desires and our necessary actions. Help us to have clarity in who we are and what we want and how to get there, particularly at times like these when a year is changing, but in every day. Help us not to lose track of ourselves. Help us not to lose track of our desires, but to stay focused and to stay vital. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and thanks. And knowing you are always with us, but from respect, we thank you for your presence and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always, and I will see you again tomorrow. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And one last comment in the chat room. Krista says, thank you. I'll start writing a list. Wonderful. And let us all have wonderful lists for the new year. Have a great